Hey everyone, welcome back to Kerbal Space Program. Last time we ran into a little bit of a problem. Some stuff exploded. And now this mission has more in common with the Martian than my Mars mission. But the truth is, part of the fun of Kerbal Space Program is dealing with problems. It's not quite as much fun when everything goes perfectly, as weird as that sounds. So we're going to find a way to recover from this. So I had hoped that bringing an engineer along would help in situations like this, because they are able to repair some parts when they break, as well as repacking parachutes and that type of thing. It turns out, unfortunately, that these parts, the solar panels and the wheels, are not just broken, they were completely destroyed. So Janmore can't do very much for this. Oh well. Instead, we're actually going to get an opportunity to point out another issue with rovers. And that is that they're useful for bringing the experiments to a new site. But you don't really need to bring them back. Kerbals have their own little jetpack, maneuvering thrusters. We saw these when they were jumping off the ship when it first landed. But they have a fair amount of fuel, actually. They can travel fairly long distances using these things, as long as there's low enough gravity. So this is going to take a lot less time than actually driving the rover would have on the way back. Which just kind of brings up the reason, why was I going to drive it back in the first place? And that's because, I was hoping we were actually going to be able to visit another site. I forgot I did that. Had to get a little bit of a report. But yeah, this turns out to be much quicker, much easier. We got to return the experiments, no problem. Just gotta be careful on the landing. It is actually possible for Kerbals to crash land and not explode exactly, but die. Perfect. Now, I think I mentioned last video that Nedry is the irresponsible one. So we probably shouldn't have left him alone. He saw Janmore fly away, and he had the realization that this rover actually has quite a bit of monopropellant and thrusters on board. I kind of designed this thing to work in a bunch of different situations, and was thinking maybe we'd take it down into the crater and have to fly out. But Nedry's thinking maybe he can just fly this thing somewhere instead of using the jetpack. And after a little bit of playing with the controls and figuring things out, this is actually going to work pretty well. So at first I'm kind of thinking maybe I'll go down into the crater and do the extra science like I was hoping. But then I kind of think that's actually quite deep, and I'm running the risk of crashing. So instead we're going to head for the ship. Now, the problem with heading towards the ship is that I realize, what happens if I actually do that well and crash into the ship? Then these guys would be stuck here. So I'm going to cancel that plan, and instead launch this thing towards the crater and ditch it. It's broken, we can't really do much with it. This was a fun little aside, but unnecessary. Okay, now as the rover passes us by on its way to its doom, this is the point where Nedry realizes he forgot to grab the science out of the rover before taking off. So yeah, totally Nedry's fault, not mine. Blame it on him. But I guess this is another good reason to do redundant experiments. If mistakes happen and you lose some of the results, at least you'll have something to bring back instead of nothing. Very cool. That was actually kind of a fun side project, I guess. Diversion. Actually, in-game, blowing things up doesn't count as debris, so really I'm just cleaning up after myself, if you think about it. Leaving less garbage on the surface. And Nedry, having learned no lesson about responsibility or patience, is just going to completely ignore the ladder again and use his jetpack to fly up to the rocket. Which doesn't go great. Alright, we got both crew back on board, and to be honest, there's nothing more to do on the surface. So we're gonna prepare to go back out into orbit and meet up with our transfer stage. Now, most of this ship, or maybe not most of the ship, but a whole bunch of the ship, we're actually going to leave behind. The side fuel tanks with the solar panels, the ladders, the landing legs, these are all unnecessary now. Not to mention the science experiments. So we are going to ditch them and leave them behind. But I'm going to use the extra engines to help get off the ground first, so not just yet. There's also this piece of debris in orbit. That must be the stage separator ring that I ditched on descent. I must have done it too early. That kind of ticks me off more than it should. Okay, so we're just going to wait until the transfer stage is just about above us. I think I'm going to see if I can find it. There we are. Just passing overhead. So here we go. And once these 4 engines run out of fuel, we're going to ditch all the extra weight. Right about now. Now, one of the things about taking off from a planet, especially one with no atmosphere, is that you basically want to burn straight sideways. You don't have to worry about, thick atmosphere or optimized gravity turns. You pretty much just need to get your apoapsis up high enough without running into terrain. In this case, we also want to intercept our transfer stage, so we got to do a little bit more messing around. This is not something I'm particularly good at. I think I don't do this quite right here. Now, these are essentially the same skills as we needed before for the refueling mission. Intercepting another object in orbit and then docking. So this is yet another good reason to master those skills, is being able to do these sort of missions with a transfer stage and a lander. Now, I actually ended up with a lot of extra fuel. I probably brought down more fuel to the surface than I needed. I probably could have saved some by leaving a whole bunch behind, but that's okay. I think we'll still have enough. You have to be very careful at this point. If you leave your lander engine activated, or if you leave your control from the lander, you'll go backwards or waste fuel or do all sorts of crazy, stupid things. You have to make sure you have it all set up right before you get going again. Now, Astrogator is telling us that it's still a year before our transfer window to get home, so these guys are going to have to get comfy again. Alright, 1 year later. We're going to plan our maneuver to get home. At this point, I think these guys are going to be happy to feel real gravity. Now, the procedure to go home is actually very similar to the one we used to get here. We need to plan a burn, and then we'll need to do a second correction burn to match planes afterwards. Really, it's the same general rules going between two planets, no matter which planets they are, even if one of them isn't Kerbin. The correction burn I'm actually going to do manually here. I want to be fairly precise where I end up when we finally do intercept Kerbin. So this is going to take a little fiddling, but I will cut most of it out, because this probably did end up taking me 3 or 4 minutes to get everything just right. Okay, now we're running into a little bit of a problem here, which is that we're a little low on fuel. We only have 576 meters per second left, and that is nowhere near enough to actually capture around Kerbin when we get there. Luckily, most of the mass of our ship is now useless. The big engine, the empty fuel tanks, control module, batteries, we don't really need these anymore. All we need is the lander that has our crew and our science experiments in it. So that last little burn I did was actually changing our trajectory so that we're going to intercept the planet. And I am going to ditch the transfer stage so that it collides with the planet and gets burned up. And then the launcher is the only part that's actually going to get captured once we get there. We have enough fuel left over to actually max out the fuel tank in the lander. And once we undock it and switch over so we're actually controlling the lander, we're going to see just how much fuel we have left. And that is almost 2,400 meters per second, just from ditching all that mass. We got another little burn here, that's just some fine tuning on our approach. And we are almost home. I'm going to speed this up here. And for anyone keeping count, we're about to tick over into year 4 of this mission. This is a long one. And there we go. We've now been captured around Kerbal, so we're not going anywhere. We're home. Well, not quite home, but you know what I mean. Just one more little burn, and we are so close. We're actually going to pass right over the Space Center, there on the east coast of this continent, 100 kilometers up, which, I mean, that's like an hour's drive on the highway. That's nothing. The one thing you may notice, though, looking at our little lander, we're going to have a bit of trouble getting down there. We have no parachutes, no heat shield, and definitely not enough fuel to actually land under power. So, we actually have one more launch to do. We are going to send up a package that has everything we need to land. So again, this requires a lot of the same skills as the refueling mission. Interception and docking. Now this package I sent up is kind of a scaffolding meant to fit around the lander that has a big heat shield on it and air brakes, parachutes. It's even got solar panels, just in case. It's maybe a little bit inefficient to send up a whole rocket just for this, because parachutes and heat shield are really all the lander needed. But I think at the end of the day it would actually end up being more efficient than sending the parachutes on the long journey. It would probably use up more fuel that way, to be honest. It would have looked prettier though. This is a little gross. I almost broke off the antennas during that docking sequence. I was kind of talking over it, but I forgot to retract them. And I really should have just retracted everything. I actually don't need it anymore. I should have had plenty of battery power to land this thing, even without the extra solar panels on the scaffolding. So I'm messing around here. I'm actually trying to plan this so that I land near the Space Center. In regular career mode, you actually sort of get a bonus for landing near the Space Center for cost of materials recovered, basically. You don't in sandbox mode that I'm playing, but I like trying to do it anyway. But I am going to make sort of the same mistake that the landing guidance system did in the last video, is that I'm not taking the planet's rotation into account, and I'm also seriously underestimating how much this giant heat shield is going to slow me down. The heat shield's really overkill. This is, I think, the biggest heat shield in the game, and I really don't need it for my little lander. But I figured since I was sending up a rocket anyway, I might as well go a little bit overboard. The other thing about the giant heat shield is that it's going to act kind of like a sail. Once we get down into the atmosphere, it's going to want to flip over so that's in behind, So the air brakes there should keep us pointed in the right direction. There it goes, it's fighting. But the air brakes work very well, and again, that heat shield slowed us down so much. And, ooh, remember what I was saying about it acting like a sail? I did not think of it when I went to ditch that thing. I should have turned the ship around first. But luckily it didn't damage anything. I did miscalculate my landing, so we're going to be landing kind of in the dark, which is annoying, especially for capturing it on video. But it still counts as a success, so I kept it. And not much to do now. This is pretty much just wait for us to drift down and touch down back home. The timing's actually not terrible. We're gonna get to see a sunrise soon after landing, and that's kinda nice. And there we go. Now I can actually say that the mission was a complete success. Got all the way to Dres and all the way back with only minor setbacks. And there we are. Okay, well that's the end of the mission. We just have to wait for the recovery team to come get them. And here we are. Back home. We gathered a whole lot of science. Like 3,000 science is a little crazy. Just a whole lot. And Janmore and Nedry, ready for next assignment. But anyway, that's going to be the end of our mission to Dres. I don't know if I'm going to do any more Kerbal Space Program videos. I'll have to think about it. Think if I have any other cool missions I feel like running. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. See you later.